All right, everyone, welcome back to the Sell That SAS podcast. I'm your host, Will Padilla. I am joined here today by Max Pashman. Super excited to have Max on. Guys, you guys know a little bit about me. I've been selling influencer software for about 5 years, and then my Sell That SAS handle on TikTok has been able to create me a really great side income for the past 3 or 4 years as a software sales content creator. So there's been a lot of fun that's happened throughout these past several years just in regards to content creation. And I just got hit with a really big tax bill this year. And I posted, I said, I need someone to help me out with my taxes as a content creator because this is getting out of hand. And if I felt like that, and I have a finance minor, so I was, very involved in the finance program at Mizzou. And also I'm in sales. I have a pretty good understanding of numbers, but if I was having this much trouble, I'm sure there's others out there as well. So I'm going to give Max a quick intro and, let you introduce yourself after me, but I did kind of just write down what I gathered. So Max is a certified financial planner. He's the founder of Pashman Financial, a modern wealth advisory firm that's built its reputation around helping sales leaders, startup operators, equity compensated tech professionals to take ownership over their financial future. He's been featured in articles such from Business Insider and NerdWallet. His philosophy is simple but powerful. Give your purpose to your paycheck and clarity to your decisions. So guys, whether you are a content creator or a sales rep, money is money and we all are impacted by money. So this episode is going to be really good. It's about financial freedom. Max, how was that intro? What did I miss?
Not bad. Pretty good so far over here. But just to add a little more details to that, I have been working on my own as a financial planner for over 10 years now, and primarily as a fee-only financial planner, which basically means that I receive compensation from the clients and no other commissions elsewhere. And alongside those areas that you mentioned, I also work with small business owners as well, specifically those that actually have transitioned out of those occupations, if they were sales tech leaders or highly compensated equity owners, them also when they're transitioning from their W-2 roles over to small business positions. And overall, I primarily focus on what we dub as holistic planning, which is I'm not so much just looking at, all the investments under the hood. It's mostly the purpose behind all of the investments and how they go behind the scenes with not just a financial plan, but an action plan and accountability along the way to make sure that they're visually seeing their goals. And just like how we connected, I primarily find a lot of these folks through my marketing, through LinkedIn, Twitter, my newsletter, and other feeds, making sure that I can help maximize everyone's knowledge by making sure I can take complicated subjects and making them simple for you to digest.
Cool. Well, I'm happy to have you here. And that's how we connected, was through LinkedIn. If you don't mind, just before we kind of get into financial wellness, what's your take as a CEO and business owner on the power of LinkedIn?
Yeah, well, it pretty much is the reason why I'm here right now as a business owner, because
Really?
I think that for myself, much like a lot of my peers working with different companies, LinkedIn and social media in general was kind of an outlet for me to really share my thoughts in general. It was never a means of creating what we call these days a personal brand or a marketing tool for the business. It was kind of one of those things that I started out where, I didn't really have an agenda behind the scenes. It was just like, you know what? There's a lot of these people now using LinkedIn. It'd be great to share something on there and try to make it simple. And I started creating a LinkedIn content that was focused on personal finance, and it got a lot of traction over the years. And now fast forward, 37,000 followers on there, the top voice from LinkedIn in the finance community. And on top of all that, as a bonus, it's been a gateway for me to connect with a lot of folks and a lot of people reaching out, which was so interesting because the way that I used to do it as a financial advisor was write down a bunch of names, cold call them, hopefully they get involved. Now it's flipped its head on itself.
People are reaching out to you, I bet.
The opposite. Not only do they reach out to me, but it's like they want to work with me. They're already convinced
You're in
work
demand
with me. Yeah, pretty much, which is so odd, it's like, because there's so many advisors right now out in the marketplace. There's over 100,000 advisors in general. And to think that there's a lot of people wanting to reach out just because of the power of social media, it allowed me to pivot to becoming a business owner and to really focus on, the occupations that you mentioned at the beginning of the video, highly compensated W-2 employees, business owners, and really have the business attuned for them. So to say the least, LinkedIn basically made that possible and pretty much changed my life after that.
Wow. That's a testament to LinkedIn right there. I mean, and I was curious there is so many financial advisors out there. They work for Edward Jones, wherever else. Like, what made you not want to work with a firm and just do things on your own?
Yeah, there was a lot that went into the mix. I didn't make the transition a very light decision, but it did come down to a couple of things. The first thing is what I was mentioning here was the social media. When I realized there were barriers being presented to me, and it's not like terrible barriers, it's just how companies operate behind the scenes. I started to realize if I really wanted to continue doing this business and making it marketing focused, I couldn't be with a big box firm. So I decided to go independent from
Mm,
there. The other part of it is that I wanted to basically create my own vision and what I wanted to actually deliver as far as financial planning. Because working with a big firm, there's a great safety net with having a lot of the work handed to you,
yes.
but to make the deliverables that I wanted, to create the accountability system, to really visualize the way that I see financial planning, that is very different from a lot of older folks that were in the industry. It just felt like we were disaligned. So it felt like I really had to make a push to do something on my own. And then the third part of it is just the flexibility that I now have as a business owner. Yeah, there's a lot more work that is expected of me, and I'm probably putting more hours behind the scenes than I did before, but it's incredibly rewarding, though. It's like work that I feel like I am more in line to do. It doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like I really want to push myself to put in more hours because I'm making this vision a reality. I can
Mm.
control my calendar. I get in front of people that I really want to. So there's definitely a lot more work behind the scenes, but it's incredibly rewarding for what you're putting in, which I think is very underappreciated. And then the combination of those were really just the pivot to go independent here and just making that something that I can now deliver on my own terms.
Wow. That's impressive, man. I mean, I'm always so impressed by people like yourself who have the talents and they just go out and on their own and it's working out well because you hit the nail on the head. I don't think a lot of small business owners really want to be sitting there making a bunch of cold calls, having to be that classic, financial planner who's always pitching like, hey, like I get it. There's going to be sales. I'm sure you do a various form of sales, but the fact that you took the let's let them come to me approach through content is definitely a separator, and that's where we can definitely have a lot to relate on. That's how I make most of my earnings is through the content that I produced. And then also for my role, I create content on LinkedIn. People are in the influencer marketing space, so naturally they're going to be scrolling social media. They see my videos, they see what company I'm attached to, and they message me. Like just before I got here, this girl texted me who is a social media director for a brand. Her and I go a little bit ways back. She's like, "Oh, I saw you on LinkedIn. You actually reminded me we need your software now." And it's like, boom. But like that doesn't happen unless you create content and actually good content that's engaging. You're not being fake. You're not being too over like salesy, but you're just giving advice. So I love where you're at, brother. Okay, so that was really my main question around what made you want to go out and do that. So let's get right into it when it comes to like financial advice. So you told me that you're different than others in the space when it comes to maybe like some older financial folks. What would you say is your biggest difference on financial freedom than most? Your biggest difference that you have in regards to advice that you would give to people rather than what maybe most of the norm financial planners would give their clients?
Yeah, it's a good question because when you're introduced to the concept of a financial advisor, everyone gets lumped into this one stereotype, basically. And it's my job to make sure that I can be able to stand out compared to a lot of others. So what do I do differently compared to, what we have traditionally seen? I have basically pivoted into a fee only model, which basically means that I can only charge for providing financial planning advice. I can't receive commissions. And I can't receive any like other types of commissions from third parties, so to speak. So because of that, we try to remove that form of conflict of interest. Now, there's going to be no such thing as being conflict free in financial advice, let alone anything out there. But it's a manner of addressing what I do. And a lot of the appeal is people just really want to know transparently, what am I paying for? What am I getting for in return? It seems like a lot of people that I have been introduced to have been coming from those that have been wanting to achieve financial independence. And I guess that the way they have been introduced to it is, through a friend or acquaintance of theirs through like high school or something like that, called them and tried to sell them an investment product or an insurance product or, some of these things. And, a lot of these types of ways used to work for a long time, but the game has changed, especially for financial advisors. And a lot of people, especially those that I'm attracting, are pretty much trying to look for someone where they could pay a flat fee for their financial planning services. And the traditional way has been, oh, I'll charge 1% to 2% of your assets under management, or I will sell you this product and receive a commission. And there's nothing inherently wrong with those models, so to speak. But what I wanted to focus on was not really being an investment manager, but really focusing on the financial planning aspect of things. Like, yes, your investment portfolio matters, but how is that in line with your goals when it comes to whether it's like an early retirement, trying to fund a large purchase for yourself, or making a shift towards business? How are you making sure that you're getting the advice needed that aligns with you in that situation? That's where I kind of pivoted more towards, is focusing on providing the advice side of things than anything else, rather than being, okay, here's a bunch of your investments, I'm going to try to beat the market or anything like that. You're not going to find that here. What you're going to find is someone that's going to give you a secondhand opinion and basically tell you, are you going to be on track to your goals? If not, or if you're so, what do you need to do? What kind of adjustments that you need to make behind the scenes? And I have set up my business so that you can actually visually see those things and you can actually be held accountable towards that progress.
Yeah.
It's something that people eventually find value when they see a lot of the practices financial advisors do, and they see this new bond. They're like, why didn't all financial planners do this to begin with? So it's making sure that I'm very transparent with my services and showing them what you're actually getting in the service space, rather than saying I'm just a money manager behind the scenes.
That's good. That's definitely different. And you sound like someone who is easy to work with. I think you and I are both younger guys, like pretty much like, I don't know, how old are you?
I'm 32.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I thought you were in your 20s. So I'm 28. So, younger guys, like same thing. And, we can relate to people with, maybe, as you said, higher earner W-2s, people who transition to go their own small business. Like, these are people who need advice. And, for people who are under the age of 45, maybe these people who are around our age, millennials, Gen Z, what would you say most people get wrong when it comes to financial planning in their late 20s and early 30s?
Well, I think that what they usually get wrong is just this idea that I'll figure it out later. I'll figure it out once I've actually made it. And what I usually find is the hardest part of any financial planning process is the initial first steps. And the reason why is because there's something really powerful about setting up a system behind the scenes that you start very early on, whether you are a high earner or not, having the right systems in place, so that as you continue to build wealth, as you continue to earn income, as you make these transitions from jobs or businesses or whatever it is, you have whatever it is behind the scenes that you can build on top of.
Wow.
What I usually see is when people have made it, they got their business up and running, 7-8 figures.
Millions are coming in.
Millions are coming in, and somehow millions are leaving the door, or let alone millions are coming in, but they're just going in the worst spots ever. Like, I've had situations where people have like too much cash, or they are
Wow.
just not allocating enough towards the areas that they're prioritizing. And it really just comes down to a simple fact, which is that there is no doubt in my mind a lot of these successful people are very good at revenue generating
Yes.
activities. But then when it comes to revenue retention, that's a whole different ball game behind the scenes when you're actually receiving it, what you are doing behind the scenes. If you don't have the right plan and the right system, things go inefficient, things get overlooked, and that ends up impacting how much you're paying, the taxes you end up paying too, the opportunity cost of it all. And
Wow.
ultimately, all those things come down to you missing your goals or delaying them because they weren't in the right places near term, midterm, and long term for yourself. So I would say that underneath it all, when it comes to what are people making the mistake of, is that they're delaying the planning process too far down the line and not having anything to begin with and building off of from the beginning.
Is there an age that you would say is too late to like where you would maybe say it's been so long, they've never invested in their 401k, they've never done any investing in general. It's like, is there an age where you're like, man, this is just too late?
I mean, I don't know if I've ever put an age in mind because I've met a lot of people who were in their 50s and their 60s who were able to catch up at that point. And maybe their retirement goals were delayed a lot later. But I don't like to say that it's too late to
Right.
do anything. There's just going to be way more expected of you at that point. Because when I usually talk to people that are starting the game very late, they usually have a lot that they can work with at that stage. You know, they're making
Sure.
considerably more income than their expenses because they're where they are in their careers and how much they actually prioritize for their spending. And they have a lot to work with. It's just they're going to need a very higher commitment from themselves later down the line that they could have otherwise done less with in the very beginning. So I don't like to throw hey, it's
Right.
too late. I probably would say it's too late until you're done with this lifetime. So
Mm, okay. And how important is time in the market for an individual?
extremely. It's
Can you talk?
not,
Can you talk to people? Like
yeah.
I went viral for recently saying like, hey, like a lot of people you see on social media, it's so like living for the now. It's like I want it now. I want to have fun now. I'm looking for a good time. I'm not looking to build a legacy. And what I mean, again, these are people in their late 20s, early 30s, and by all circumstances, you and I could say that we're young guys. But the good time type of mentality, to me, if you take someone who invests in a 401k throughout their early 20s to 30, they could do no investing for the rest of their life and they could still beat out someone who started in their 50s and they did twice the amount just because of time and market. But like from your perspective, how important is time and market?
Yeah, it's obviously it's something that you are hearing very often these days, especially if you follow personal finance creators and whatnot. And it's not all for just good enthusiasm. It is backed by facts. And what we have seen in markets, and to be very clear, kind of like what you were saying right now, like living in the now, right? There's a very interesting dynamic that we have seen. It's either people want to live all right now or they want to live all in the future. And at first it's like, what do you mean live all in the future? And that can be the FIRE community that we have heard about. And that stands for financial independence, retire early. And some of the early iterations of this movement was, I don't want to wait until I'm 65. I want to be able to retire earlier and live my life later down the line and not be with my employer. So I'm going to put every single dollar on the side towards this and maybe retire by 55 or 50 years old. So there's an extreme going towards saving a lot for your future. But then there's the other side, like you mentioned, where it's, kind of we dub as like the YOLO crowd, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to just do everything now. So you're spending everything now because you don't want to worry about what's going on later down the life. You got these two sides trying to unbalance the other out. And one of the problems that you're going to find when you talk about personal finance is that absolutes are horrible
Yeah.
in that realm because The thing about personal finance, taxes, all these things, it is never black and white. There are some concepts that are universal with everything. But things not so much, and especially when it comes to understanding your finances. But here is something that we do know. When it comes to investing in markets in general, I'm not talking about like picking a single company. I'm talking about like broad markets, indexes, and whatnot. If you actually look at the data for longer periods of time, what we find is a very, very interesting relationship between the correlation between how long you've held your investment towards, versus like the period of time you're holding it towards. So the relationship is significant when it comes to how much you could potentially lose as a result of your investments. And nothing is ever guaranteed by any counts. But here's something that you will find in most data. What you will find is that when you have a shorter period of time, the likeliness of losing is significantly higher compared to a slightly longer period. They're like the difference between a month, between that and a year could be significant. It could be as much as you potentially losing 30% of your money, but as you go to 1 year, it could lower to something like 20% or 15%. But what we find is if you have a longer time horizon, the likeliness of losing money decreases significantly. It's not eliminated by any means, but it's significantly reduced. And I see tons of reports like this. If you look at the Dow Jones or the S&P 500, if you actually just do this yourself, you look at what we call a rolling period. You take any 10-year time horizon, whether it's between now all the way back from 2015 or 2010 to 2020 or any of these times, you see that the likeliness of you being positive is significantly higher than being in a shorter time frame. And it's a hard concept to put in simple terms, but the fact of the matter is that when you look at the data, it shows that those that want to invest are better suited spending more time in the market because the data says longer time horizon is actually better in your favor.
Yep.
This is also why we simultaneously say if you have a shorter time horizon and you need your funds soon, like if you need your funds in 1, maybe 2 years, you don't want to be all on the market because of the amount of risk that goes on. Like as of this recording, we've been seeing so much volatility in 2025, right?
It's up big today, though.
Yeah, we have good day today, but it could go the other way tomorrow.
So
it could
true.
keep going up, like the multiples are significant. The volatility, or the VIX as what we call it, is crazy at this current moment. But that's why when we need our money in the next couple months, I don't want to like put it all in the market because of how volatile it's going to be. That's why we want to keep things in cash or low risk securities. But when you see the data, it shows, hey, over 10, 20, 30-year periods, the data shows it's actually in your favor to spend more time in the market. That's why you want to position your funds for those long-term goals for those areas. So there's a very delicate balance between, what you need short-term versus long-term by just simply answering one question. And it's just simply, when do you need your money? You need your money soon, want to be very safe with it, long-term, grow high risk as it is. It's a incredible relationship that is proven over and over the more we spend more time in the market.
Man, I've got so many things on this. This is good. And talk about lifestyle creep. Talk about high earners who are in that lifestyle creep and how dangerous that can be for someone who wants to plan for their future.
Well, I'll give you a couple of things here. I'll tell you what it is, I'll tell you what I see, and I'll tell you how we can address it.
All right.
As far as like what we usually see. So what is lifestyle creep? It is basically the idea that when you receive more money, you end up kind of just relaxing a bit and you're just saying, you know what? I made more money. I can reward myself as a result of that. And this process goes over and over again. And to be frank, all of us are guilty of this in some extent.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you're a sales professional, you've been chasing someone for 6 months to try to lock down a 5 to 6 figure deal, you finally do it, you want to reward yourself, right? You're like, I just did all this work. You know what? Maybe I'll celebrate. I do all these things. This is one example,
Yeah.
right? But whenever we see a raise in income in any extent, if you do not plan for that raise, the entire amount's going to translate to you spending it.
Yeah.
Because if there is no plan, then you're not saying to yourself, okay, I need to put this on the side for this goal. I need to put it for these investments. So where does it go? It ends up going to your cash. And then if you have no plans for that cash, you end up spending it. And what happens over time, as these add up over time, you start to see your lifestyle expenses increase, not to the pace of inflation, but more than inflation, by the pace of your paycheck after that. So what happens when I meet a lot of high earners, especially that never met with a financial planner before, is I will see people making 300, 400,000 of income and somehow having nothing to put on the side, and their expenses have been so raised to such an extent.
I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, it's like, you know, you're in the top 1% of earners in the world, and you have nothing to show for it. Are we talking like no money invested in their accounts, their Roths, their 401k, like not a huge amount of savings, like less than 10 grand? Like, are we really talking that type of style?
Yeah, we are absolutely talking that type of style. Like maybe they're contributing a little bit to their 401k. Maybe
That's
they're putting a little bit
wild.
towards their savings. Yeah, it happens all the time because people
Where
have
does it
this.
go? Is it like Dave Ramsey says? Is it on new cars? Like what is it like?
I mean, if you look at the data, the highest expenses are living expenses like your home, your rent. That's at the top. The second one is transportation. So maybe you might get a new car, and it's crazy. Some of these ones that we've seen. I'm a big car guy, by the way. So like,
Hey,
I don't judge if you like cars and everything
I
like
like
that. But
cars too.
you gotta be able to know what you can afford and have that kind of boundary. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't know what that boundary is. They see, I make this amount of income, so I can be able to afford it after. And what happens is just the floor is so high for so many of those. So it takes a uh, real look at as far as like what your spending is. And the thing that I personally don't like to do is I don't like to introduce budget cuts for
Yep.
any kind of expenses, because it can only go so low to such a certain extent. There's only a certain amount that you can cut because there's a lot that can be fixed, unless you have like a refinance or a recast of your mortgage, you're not going to be able to lower your mortgage payments. It's going to be hard to pay down a high car auto loan if it's locked in at a high interest rate for 6 years
Ouch.
after that. So it definitely hurts having this floor. So, like I could definitely go in and say, hey, maybe you can cut this, but when you look at it from a black and white perspective, you can only reduce up to 100% of your expenses. But in reality, it's probably you can lower it to a very small fraction of what that is. So what is usually the solution? And it's a tough pill for people to hear when I say this. And it's not so much, hey, cut back, so to speak. It's more so, what are you doing with new income in the future? And this is how you actually address this. And if you're lucky enough where you haven't gone to that extent, this is probably one of the best tips that you could hear that you don't have to, pay for financial advice
Yeah.
for, is that if you make additional income, you should be saving a higher percentage of what that is relative to your savings rate. So I'll give you an example of this. So let's say someone is saving 10% of their income
Okay.
on the side. Let's say they're making 100,000 and they're putting aside 10% of that income. Let's just assume you get $100,000 raise. What a lot of people would do is they would just still save 10% of that total amount. So they're saving the new 10,000 of that, but they're spending the rest of that. What you should be doing instead is you should be saying, okay, at this new 100,000, how much do I need for my current expenses right now? This amount remaining left over is what I would be putting on the side for whatever purpose. So it's no longer 10%. It might be 20% more, 30% more. I've seen cases where it's like 50% more.
Wow.
So every time they get a new raise, they're saving incrementally more than what they were already saving. And that way they could increase their savings rate without having to make any adjustments for their
Wow.
expenses. It has its pros and cons, right? The biggest pro is that you're saving a lot more, but the con of it is like that's under the assumption that you're making more money. So if you're not making more income, then you got to resort to your expenses and trying to budget and everything like that. But there's been some fantastic studies showing this. Some of those, include to save twice your age, for example. So one example would be if you're 30 years old, if you multiply that by 2, that's 60. If you get a raise, you should be saving 60% of that new raise. So it
Mm.
just makes it a lot easier for you to translate new income into higher savings rates for yourself. And that way you still can spend a little more with your expenses, but you're saving way more than you otherwise would have before.
Mm. Wow. Well said, man. This is, I mean, personal finance is one of my favorite topics, and people think that I'm, sometimes a bit of a nerd about this stuff. Like, I love investing. I love just not touching my money. It just goes right in the market. I have it auto draft, and I have a savings account. I know where my money's going. I became debt free by the age of 25, so that was a big thing for me. Paid off about 40 something thousand in debt. And this, again, everyone has their own struggles and battles, but I made it a point to get out of debt as fast as possible after college.
Mm.
And I run into a lot of people who are in their late 20s even, who have never invested. They've never set aside any money into a mutual fund, their 401k, a Roth. I mean, it kind of, for someone like me, it's kind of shocking because like, is it a lack of knowledge? Is it a lack of, I don't want to give up my lifestyle? Like, it is quite shocking. And I was curious, like, what you see most.
Well, it's a lot of those and a lot of others too, right? It's lack of knowledge, it's a distrust as
Ah,
well, especially when it comes to, when look at the stock market. If you were affected by '08 or the dot-com bubble, you might be a little hesitant to invest after seeing your money fall near term for yourself. Um, there's also just when it comes to like investing on the side, they have maybe like too many options in front of them too. Should I go into individual stocks? Should I go with index funds? Should I go with real estate? Should I even go with crypto? People
a
don't
lot of people
are
do
just
crypto.
Yeah, they do, which is totally fine by
Yeah.
all accounts if that's what you want to do. And, obviously you got to understand the risk behind it. But the fact is, like, people just don't know where to start, so to speak. And so they're just like, I'll just put in my 401k in the meantime, which is not bad if it checks all the boxes that we would look over. But I think that people just have a lack of direction. They just are not very aware. And a lot of people, maybe it's different from you and I. We have a deep interest in this stuff, right?
It's
Like I do it
so
as a
riveting.
profession. Yeah. You like it for yourself. You mentioned that before, but a lot of people just aren't. A lot of people just like do not care about it. They'd rather focus on so many other things than personal finance, so they just like don't really see the value of doing it. It's a combination of these things all together, but it just really becomes a question of what is going to push someone to do that. I think once they start to see, it's either one of two ways that you could see it, right? You could either look at the history of markets or investments, and that can motivate you to say, you know what, I want to outperform inflation. I want to do better. I want to make more wealth. That's one motivating factor. The other motivating factor is, like you see this deadline coming up of retirement, and you start to punch the number, say, okay, if I make this amount, I put aside this amount, I make this kind of return on my investment, it's going to lead to this, and you feel like you're underfunded. Well, now you're like, okay, I actually have to do this. So I think it's really just how they are being introduced to the world of wealth, whether it's motivating them to create more money because they want to create more money, or they're doing it because they have this deadline coming up in their life, whether it's retirement or just exiting their job, and no one's giving them that push to get over there. So it's
Mm.
it's all of the above, in my opinion.
Man, I feel like I have so many questions for you. I got one quick one for you. How often do you meet people where they just feel like they never thought that they'd be in the position they're in, where life just happens so fast? It's like they were just living, 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 and they're like, how am I this age and now I have to plan for retirement. Like this is all sudden feels very sudden because I feel like in your 20s and early 30s, you're not really thinking about, I hate to be, just honest, but you're not really thinking about death. You're not thinking about when am I actually going to leave this earth, right? And because you don't think about that, there is a lack of investment from a lot of people in our generation because that's not really top of mind. But then all of a sudden you get to a point where your body starts to age, starts to slow down. You don't want to work as much. And you're like, okay, now I want to start. Then they come to you and it's like, man, how did life just happen so fast? Like, do you ever run into that? And like, that's got to be tough.
Well, I mean, wait till a parent has kids, then they'll really get pushed to do that once they see how much college costs. That's an extreme motivator right
Ooh.
there, because once they get kids, once they're introduced to the subject, they start to realize how much it is. And then they start to realize I got to
Wow.
fund my own retirement too on top of it.
So
And then
kids are a motivating factor, huh?
Oh yeah, it's a big one.
Because I don't know. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of studies. Like the birth rates are down. Not a lot of millennials and Gen Z are like having as many kids. Like, does that impact what's going on right now when it comes to financial planning?
I mean, once you feel like you're behind, no matter how good you are, it's going to motivate you to push onwards. And the reason why I bring that up is primarily because when I put together like an education analysis for parents, because they was asking me like, how much should I put on the side? And just so everyone here understands, when you look at the data with funding college, like whether you decide you want to do it or not, parents want to prepare for it. They want to prepare for the potential that their kids might want to go to college, right? What they find is the prices have gone up on average 6% historically. 6%. I mean, when you compare that to the stock market in question, the S&P 500's averaged around 10% per year. In the history of the stock market itself, it's been just over 7%.
Yeah.
So just look at the history of the stock market compared to that 6% figure. I mean, saving your way to prepare for college is just you need to use your investments to your side. And when they see that number, take today's tuition, and it inflates by 6% every single year for 18 years, then they start to see, wow, if my child wants to go to a nice private school, it's going to set me back $500,000 in future dollars altogether. And they're just like, okay, I got to get started right away. But it's not just their kids. They're like, okay, I got to start for myself here too. I got to make sure I'm funding these opportunities. I would say in these conversations that I've had, when parents see how much it's going to cost to fund for their children's future, that is a motivating factor immediately right there. And like I said, it's a lot of parents that I meet with, they never know if their kid is going to go to college. And that's very valid, especially with what we see. Like we hear online, like college degrees are useless, right? Like I think there's like a flip to that, right? But parents also don't want to be unprepared if that happens too. They want peace of mind knowing that their kids are going to be taken care of. And I would say that is a huge motivator for them, so that not only could they fund these things, but maybe to achieve them sooner, to spend more time with their kids, and really whatever their priority is. If it is their business, if it's their time, if it's their spouse, whatever it is, they want to make sure that they're able to enjoy these things sooner than they otherwise would if they weren't saving for their future.
Wow. That's well put, man. That makes sense. It's all about like what motivates people is what I'm gathering from you, is what motivates them. So let's transition a little bit. One of the things I was curious about, top 3 legal ways that a small business owner can save on taxes.
Yeah. So obviously, for the full disclosure, I don't give tax advice. I do help with the tax planning side than anything else.
We'll leave that one out.
But here's the thing. Here's what I would say is some of the things that I usually see with business owners that they do overlook when it comes to taxes, okay? First of all, they're not working with the CPA. I say it to every single business owner. Absolutely work with an accountant or a tax professional, CPA, if needed for your situation, because the system is a mystery as it is, right? It is written in hundreds of pages of legal documents. And just today, as right before I hopped on our call, they're putting together a new iteration of the tax laws to be determined what's going to happen. But if it is in place, all I can say is that business owners are going to continue to benefit from a lot of the new legislations
It
that could be in
it
effect.
looks like it, right? Like it looks like it's going to go very business owner heavy
Yeah, and
in their
it's not just
favor.
yeah, in their favor, and there's some other areas too, like how it helps people in low class areas. But when we're talking to business owners in particular, there's a lot of advantages that they could take advantage of. And I can't stress enough that they should not be trying to interpret the tax law by themselves. And this goes for any business owner that wants to work on their finances, that wants to work on their legal documents or the tax advice here. You should not be going at it alone,
Yeah.
because I can rest assured that these CPAs and these tax advisors are going to be the ones that are going to make the most of your personal net profit so that you can take more deductions for your business. You can use them efficiently and legally. Like, it's nothing like under the table that they're doing. They just know how to use it best to your advantage. And I would say that people think that they could do it on their own. They could, try to wing the system however way possible. But I can't stress enough that sometimes just paying for a CPA is seriously worth it, for not just them interpreting the tax law and using it to your advantage, but also time. Why spend so much time trying to do that for yourself? You got to be 110% focused on what you're good at in building your business. That's why I hire a CPA. That's why a lot of people that I work with hire CPAs, because we just don't have time for that stuff. It's just like, sure, we'll do, the basic inputs and whatnot. But in terms of how to use it for my tax advantages, I think that overlooking a tax professional continues to be underappreciated here.
That's well said. Thank you. Thank you for that. Two more questions for you. What advice would you give to those in their 20s who have yet to invest?
Well, investing is not going to make a difference if you have nothing to invest with. When you are working in, let's say, a job, for example, it's your job to make sure that you are making the most of your income and the opportunities to then take and invest on the side. Investing in general, it is worth nothing if you don't have the personal cash flow to work with in the very beginning. You need to make sure that you are having enough income in the very beginning to translate that into the investing side. And what a lot of people tend to mess up here is they tend to think, you know what, if I just get this return on my investments, it will make up for it. I can assure you that the better way to approach it is prioritizing having a higher savings rate over a return on your investment, especially early on in your career. Because people are like, if I just put 1,000 on the side, maybe if I get a 1,000 or 10,000 return, that will fund my return. It's much easier to try to contribute 1,000 more every single month, and that will get you closer to your goals versus trying to put it max reward, but due to a high risk with it, right? I think what a lot of people should do, especially early on, is prioritize increasing that savings rate as much as possible. Making enough income through your job, obviously living, I don't want to say living below your means, but just like making sure you're not spending more than what you're receiving, right? But making sure that you are focusing on how can I increase my savings rate overall. And that's going to be based on your income through your job to begin with.
Okay. All right. And last question for you. Top 3 financial mistakes you see people in their 20s and 30s make.
Well, I would probably say that first one that I just mentioned earlier, not trying to prioritize a return on investment over a savings rate. That would be the first one there. The second one that I would say is, well, if you're a business owner, I think this is something that I would commonly see happen to them all the time, is that they don't treat their business as an investment in this process. And what I mean by that is, if you are trying to create a business or even a side hustle through your job, right, through your W-2 job, maybe you're a high income content creator, something like that, recognize that if you are putting your money into your business, that in of itself is an investment that
Yeah.
you are making to increase your profits, to increase your revenue. But don't try to exclude that. Don't feel like, hey, the only way to invest is if I put my money in a 401k
Ah,
or a Roth IRA or something like that. Depending on what your priorities are, if you're still in the growth stage of your business and you're not where you want to be quite yet, don't feel like you have to put everything in retirement accounts. If anything, maybe you want to put it inside of like regular investment accounts that you can easily access earlier. But don't feel like you have to lock everything up. And especially if you are not in a position financially to be able to make those investments.
mm,
And then the third thing that I probably would say when it comes to, well, just like financial mistakes in general, is probably trying to time the market. And it happens all too often. We touched on this really earlier, and I can get really repetitive when it comes to being time in the market, spending more time. But once I get off of LinkedIn and I get off my device and I have a conversation with someone on the street or I meet with family and whatnot, they're still in that universe. No matter what I preach online, everyone still tries to beat the market or they feel like they have to outsmart their business or to do something different when it comes to their investments. And I think the mistake is trying to say, I'm going to be doing something different. But the biggest part is ignoring traditional advice that works here. It's good to be different when it comes to your strategy as far as what should I be doing for my business?
yeah.
What am I going to be doing for and which investments should I be choosing? Which type of account should I be in? Right. But some traditional advice remains true. Spending time in the market is the case. Having a long-term mindset behind the scenes, consistently investing despite what market downturns do in between. It's understanding the difference between what should be the same and what should be different for your situation and not confusing the two.
Mm. Well said, man. Well said. Thank you. This has been good, man. This has been really, for me, I love finance and not a lot of people like it. So I think it's good just for the audience to hear how important it is to plan for the future. Above all else, that's the biggest thing I got is like planning for the future. There's some mistakes to avoid that can put you in a bad position, but if you don't make them, you can be well ahead of your peers. And as you said, it all comes down to your goals. Do you want to retire at 40? You want to retire at the standard 59 and a half? Do you want to retire at 50? There's all different options. It comes to what's most important for you and your life. Max, it's been a pleasure having you on. I'd love to be able to send you some business if people are listening and they're looking for an advisor. So Max, tell everyone, how they can find you and, what would you like to work with them on if they were to reach out?
Yeah, I appreciate that. You can find me on my website, which is pashmanfinancial.com. But most people find me through my profile. If you just type in Max Pashman CFP, it'll be the first profile in there, and you can follow me for content. And I would honestly suggest, like, hey, just follow me for a bit, get an
Yeah.
idea of how I actually address this stuff, because I recognize that a lot of people that come in, we're all strangers on the internet. Just get a feel for how I talk and how I present myself and see if we're even a right fit from a character perspective with each other. But then once you're ready, just feel free to reach out to me. There's a scheduling link in there. And the people that I really do better serve than anything else, it's really 50-50 right now. It's highly compensated individuals, especially those with equity compensation and looking how to manage that for their financial goals. Then the other part is small business owners, and whether you do that full time or part time in your situation, you're looking to transition over to that role and really making sure that you're getting the full picture from financial planning and you have all the resources to make better decisions for yourself. And I'm more than happy to take on anyone if they're willing to commit to it, of course, making sure that they're looking for that right wingman to make sure they get on top of their goals.
This is good, man. Financial freedom, everyone. Financial planning. It's important. I know it's not the sexiest thing in the world, but my gosh, is it important. So yeah, Max, thank you again, brother, for spending time with us today on the Sell That SAS podcast. Guys, again, if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you guys give the podcast a rating. If you're on YouTube, we appreciate the YouTube subscribership. We know that's been growing. We're very grateful. And if you want to share this podcast with someone who's a high earner or small business owner that might be in need of a financial planner. I think Max has proven today that he's not only relatable, but he has some great actionable tips. So I think people would really like to work with him. And with that being said, that's it for today. Thank you.